Hello, I think we're live. Yes. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Let's Talk Grassroots. Today we are joined by Jaz from Worldwide Tribe. But before we introduce her and she becomes live on here, I'll introduce myself. It's a bit rude, sorry. I'm Holly, and I'm the founder of Indigo Volunteers. And just a couple of notifications. We've recently opened applications for health professionals, qualified doctors and nurses for projects. That there's some countries that are accepting health professionals. So please, if you or yourself or you know anyone who is a qualified doctor or nurse and wants to come and volunteer, please do get in touch with us. You can ask questions throughout this interview and anything that you want to ask Jaz. And why are we doing this? Well, we feel Let's Talk Grassroots is all about speaking to people who are working in and around the grassroots movement and allowing them the opportunity to share their story and for anyone at home to ask questions. So I'm just going to add Jaz. Do-do-do-do. Fingers crossed it works. Yeah! Hello!
Yay!
Hello!
Hello.
Thank you so much for joining. So everyone, this is Jaz from Worldwide Tribe, which is an online community raising awareness about refugee issues and sharing the storytelling, right? Do you want to just tell us a bit more about Worldwide Tribe and the really interesting story of how it all started?
Yes. So we are an online community, I guess, is the best way to describe it. And we make films, we have a podcast, I give talks to really raise awareness about the refugee crisis and migration in general, and to try and unpick some of those stereotypes or preconceived ideas that people might have about asylum seekers, or some of these words that need unpicking sometimes. And yeah, it's a good story actually how it started for me, and that's a nice question to think about right now, because I'm having a bit of time to reflect, I guess, on the last 5 years, because it's coming up to exactly 5 years ago, our 5-year birthday.
Bonkers.
And yeah, I know, mad. Did you ever think that you'd still be doing this years later?
Absolutely no way. Also, I'm not really a good planner anyway. So I just was just taking it like not even week by week, I think day by day. And then all of a sudden you blink and then the years have gone and that's it. So yes, I'm sure it's exactly the same for you.
That's exactly what's happened. I mean, I didn't, yeah, I never would have seen this coming. And I can't believe it. Sometimes I think 5 years, like that's such a long chunk of time. But yes, it was 5 years ago. It was the early summer 2015, when, if anyone can cast their minds back that far, the refugee crisis was kind of first coming into our news, and it was kind of all over the headlines at the time in the UK, but in quite a dehumanizing way. So there was lots of kind of terms like swarms of migrants and marauding migrants and things like that. So yeah, it was at that time that I was kind of reading about it and quite interested, but I didn't know anything about the refugee crisis or refugees in general at the time. But it kind of coincided with my mum and dad looking to take on another child. So my youngest biological brother, there was 4 of us, he was turning 18, and I think they had this fear that they would be left with an empty house and no kids at home. So they were looking through the process, and they kind of contacted our local social services, and it turned out that at that time there were, and still actually, there were quite a lot of unaccompanied children arriving to the UK via the Calais jungle, and they were arriving to Kent, and my mum and dad live in Kent. So yeah, it was something that they kind of didn't expect beforehand. It wasn't planned, but as they were going through the process, it seemed more and more likely that my new brother and sister would be coming via Calais, because my mum and dad were quite willing to take on an older child, and a boy and a child that didn't speak English. So yeah, that's kind of, I had this personal interest in the refugee crisis too. So I went to Calais that first time, to the jungle, to kind of try and find out a little bit more about where my new sibling might be coming from and what might have happened to him, because at the time, you know, the narrative around refugees was very focused on Syria, and what I learned very quickly was that actually the jungle represented a huge demographic of people from all over. And I met Eritreans, and I met Afghans, and I met people from Sudan. And actually my first foster brother, Mez, he arrived not long after that trip. My first trip, I mean. I didn't meet him when I was there. But yeah, he was 14 at the time, and he was Eritrean. And he had made the journey. He'd left Eritrea when he had just done 13, so it had taken him a whole year to get to the UK. And he had a crazy, incredible journey to get there. You know, he crossed the Mediterranean Sea and the Sahara Desert, and he hid underneath the Eurotunnel train, and like all of this crazy stuff. But yeah, so those two things kind of happened at the same time. I went to Calais. I wrote a Facebook post about that first trip that got lots of traction, and encouraged and inspired kind of lots more of the grassroots response in Calais. That's why I love this series that you're doing, and that it's focused on that amazing grassroots response. So yeah, that was kind of happening alongside my mum and dad also taking on another child, and poor Mez must have been like, what is going on? Because we were kind of accepting donations, and the house was full of like tents and sleeping bags, and yeah, it was a crazy time. Summer 2015. I will never forget it.
What family has he entered into? He must have just been really confused.
Yeah, I wonder if he thought that everyone in the UK was doing that, but then probably not, because he'd been in Calais, so he'd seen that there was no volunteers there.
Does every family in the UK have 100 sleeping bags in their lounge? And that's so interesting, because but so essentially it was like a simultaneous thing. That's such a beautiful story, that you were naturally interested, and then your parents wanted to foster, and that came across. So that's such a nice story. And saying for me with my mum, when people say like, why do you do like work that is kind or helps other people, I always just think it's my mum. Like it's my mum is the inspiration. She has just shown nothing but kindness my whole life. I've seen her be kind to people, and we fostered as well, which I'll get into the fostering bit. I've got so many questions for you. And yeah, so that's really nice. You have a really similar story with it as well. Just going on to the, essentially you said that your social media post got traction. Essentially it went viral, right? And that's how Worldwide Tribe. So what happened from it going viral, and what you started off with the Worldwide Tribe to where you are now? How's the organization developed?
Yeah, it's changed a lot. Oh my God, Holly. I mean, I'm sure that you can relate to this a little bit, because, you know, I put out that first post saying, you know, I'd been to the camp. What I'd experienced was very different from, you know, what I'd been reading in the news. People weren't scary and like running around with like knives or whatever crazy like headlines that, you know, were out at the time in like the Daily Mail or whatever. Anyway, yeah, what I actually experienced was a lot of kindness, and also a lot of people who needed their basic needs covering, like tents and sleeping bags and warm clothing and food, you know, at the time. So I wrote this post saying that I wanted to go to the camp again, and that you know, if anyone had any old tents or, you know, warm clothes that they didn't need anymore, just drop them over. Like, this is my mum and dad's address in Kent, this is my brother's address in Brixton. It was the stupidest thing ever, because I think like millions of people ended up seeing that post, so we were absolutely inundated. Like, it was mad. We had drop-off days in London. We filled like 8 warehouses. Honestly, that response from people wanting to do something was just completely overwhelming. So yeah, I mean, my brother's housemate had to move out of the house for a while because it was full of tents and sleeping bags. And my mum and dad were not happy either, because like their garden and like garage and like everything was overflowing, and we started trying to distribute this stuff in Calais. So early days of the Worldwide Tribe, there was much more of a focus on physical stuff, and, you know, we were really trying to meet those basic needs, and that seemed like the obvious thing to do at the time. But over the years, what I've realized and what I really feel passionately about is that of course, it's very, very important to tend to these needs, and lots of amazing grassroots groups are continuing to do that. You know, Help Refugees and RCK are doing food in northern France, and you know, lots of incredible grassroots organisations. But what really spoke to me and what I found really difficult was that there were still many people that had these negative opinions about refugees and asylum seekers, and that actually, you know, you can give out as many tents and sleeping bags, but the camp shouldn't be there in the first place, and why was it there? And the, you know, a change and a shift in these mindsets was actually getting more to the root of the problem. And that's something that the Worldwide Tribe has continuously tried to tackle. So we've done that through various ways. You know, at the beginning, we made a film about the jungle called Jangala, which looked to answer these questions that, you know, I had when I first went there, like, where are people coming from and why do they want to come to the UK and that kind of thing. And over the years, that's developed into, I now spending a lot of time focusing on a podcast. And each episode shares the story of an incredible person that I've met along the way. I'm ready for you to be a guest on there, Holly.
I feel ashamed. Yeah. Like Alf Dubs and people you've had on there. Who's been, like, it's probably hard to say, but who's been your favourite guest that you've had on there? Because your podcast is so incredible, and you're right, like they kind of like Let's Talk Grassroots, where we're handpicking people to share their stories. You're doing that on the podcast in more depth. Like, have you got a favourite guest that you've had?
Oh, that's so difficult because, yeah, you're right. Like so I've done 2 seasons, and the first season was kind of the people closest to me. So, you know, Mez, my foster brother, we did 2 episodes together, and they were, the first one that we did together is the most popular episode, and that tells the story of how he came from Eritrea to the UK, which is just mind blowing. So that was an amazing one. But and then I did an episode with my mum, and she talks about fostering, and how she's now a mum of 8 kids from 5 different countries, and what that looks like for her. And you know, a lot of people, I think, really enjoyed listening to that one because it was relatable in some sense, because she's talking from the perspective of a mum, you know, who is very much like, these are kids and like they needed love, and that was it really. But I think one of my top episodes is episode number 3, and it's with a guy called Brendan, who actually is a search and rescue worker, and he worked in Lesbos for a long time. And he tells a story on that episode that I've heard many times, but every time it brings me to tears. And it's a story of how he saves a baby from the Mediterranean.
Oh, Christ.
And it's, I know, but I mean, it's a happy ending. Spoiler alert. But
actually getting emotional just literally talking about like, the thought of it. It's too much.
It's unreal. Wow. I mean, the way that he tells it, and the experience that he had, you know, he's the normal dad of 2 from Nottingham, and he went out as a grassroots volunteer with no previous experience, and found himself, you know, on the shoreline dealing with things that he never expected to see or do. So yeah, I think that episode was a powerful one for me. But yeah, they're all, I mean, that's difficult to say.
And that's a really important point that you're raising about, like, it's people that just normal people who end up doing these things, and obviously as Indigo we're really promoting that. Like there's so many people that email us going, I don't know if I can help, I don't know if I've got the right skills, and we're like, well, apply. And I think it's like 99% matching that we do. I think it might even be 100, but I don't want to say that. But let's go with 90
in case we catch you out.
Yeah, there's always somewhere you can place someone. Like there's help needed everywhere, and so yeah, it's really important to highlight that it's just people like me and you and the neighbour, whoever, just going out and filling in these gaps. Just I want to kind of talk about the fostering a bit more, just for those that don't know, what is an unaccompanied minor? How does it happen that people in the UK need to foster them first? And then I've got more questions.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think that, you know, there's a lot of misunderstanding that people sometimes think that like maybe I met them in the camps in Europe, or that we, you know, took them from Eritrea or whatever, but that it was not the case at all. Basically, an unaccompanied minor is a child under the age of 18 who comes to the UK alone without a parent or guardian. And there are many, right? And basically, if you're under 16 as a boy, generally, you get the option to be placed with a family or placed in a kind of centre. But anyway, the reason why they might be arriving to the UK without a parent, there are many reasons. So I can give you some examples based on my experience. But lots of the boys that I meet, and including two of my little brothers, they were fleeing compulsory military service. So in Eritrea, there's compulsory military service that, you know, once you're in, and it's kind of unlimited. And for a lot of people, you're fighting for something that, you know, you absolutely don't believe in. And, you know, I have an Afghan brother whose family were killed by the Taliban, and a Sudanese brother who his mum was killed in Darfur in the genocide. So, you know, there's many reasons. It could be that they still have family in their country, or it could be that they no longer have family, but they had a reason to leave because it wasn't safe for them anymore. So yeah, I've heard many reasons over the years from different countries and different situations. But yes, and some really, really sad, horrible ones. So I have 4 little brothers now, who are all from different countries, an Eritrean, a Sudanese, an Afghan, and a Libyan brother. And yeah, they all have a very valid reason for being here. And yeah, I mean, it's really sad actually, because in the UK we do have the facilities and they are placed with families, but in France, for example, or in Greece too, right, you meet many unaccompanied minors that don't have that that afforded to them, or that support system.
Yeah. The situation in the camps here generally is quite diabolical for unaccompanied minors. There are groups obviously trying to look after them, and some groups do. A lot of grassroots groups, you know, do really incredible jobs with the resources that they have. But it's absolutely it's awful thinking what they have to go back to. And here on Samos, there's only room for the unaccompanied minor container. As I understand it, is only so big, so they can fit X number of people in, and then everyone else just has to sleep either by themselves in a tent in the jungle area, which is outside the camp, or with another family that's just taken them in out of their the kindness of their hearts. And there is so little support. And there's been recently a really great movement of transporting some of the unaccompanied minors to Germany or the UK or wherever they're going, which has been really, really great to see. Like, it's just brought joy to my heart seeing these, like,
I thought the same, finally.
Yeah. Why? Okay, a question. Why are many of the unaccompanied minors male and not female?
It's a great question. And actually, I find, you know, in Calais, for example, the whole demographic of the camp was much more male than female. And again, you know, when I kind of tried to dig below the surface as to why that might be, a lot of people told me that they were fleeing for the reasons of war. So whether that be compulsory military service, or being caught up in groups that they, you know, that they were fleeing the Taliban or whatever that might be, that's a reason for men often. But also, it's a very difficult journey to make as an unaccompanied girl. They do exist. They are there. I have met unaccompanied girls that have made it to the UK, but it's very, very difficult physically and mentally and emotionally. So yeah, often it is majority boys and male, but that's the demographic that have actually made it to the UK. You know, I know that there's a lot more families and women and children in Greece than there are in France, because it's one step previous on the journey. So
that's a really important thing to highlight, is that yes, of course, photographers or newspapers love taking the photographers images of of where there's lots of males and creating scare. But that's another thing I say, just come here and you'll see it's such a mix of women, men, children. Like there is, and there are reasons, like examples that you've just given, why there are sometimes more males that go, like because of conscription into the army, and that's always going to be with men, and escaping that. So there's reasons why it's a bit more higher volume of males, but it's really such a mix when you come to the camps and you actually see for yourself.
Exactly. And just to add to that point, one more point is that to get to to be fostered or adopted or to be in the system in the UK, you have to actually be on UK soil. So there's no way that, like my brother Mez, I could have met him in France and then been like, oh, you can come and join my family and come with me. That, unfortunately, that legal route doesn't exist. So he has to make it to the UK illegally. And in order to do that, you have to hide on a train or in the back of a lorry, and you know that, as I say, is very demanding and difficult to be able to do.
And the risks involved, we can't even imagine. So I urge everyone to listen to the first episode of your podcast, so everyone can hear that story in more detail.
There's a story.
There is a story there. You've also been to Bangladesh recently and gone to the massive Rohingya camp. Tell us about that experience and how you feel that compares to the European refugee camps that you've seen.
Yeah, I spent some time there at the end of last year, actually, just kind of before all of the lockdown restrictions and stuff. And I actually recorded an episode of the podcast when I was there with a doctor who has been updating me since everything's been developing with COVID. But little did we know when we recorded that podcast how relevant her words about healthcare in the camp would be and what they would mean this year. But yeah, it was a really interesting experience to go there, having worked in the camps in Europe predominantly for a few years, because the scale is just something else, Holly. I mean, it was, you know, there's over 1 million Rohingya refugees there. Same as in Europe, it's difficult to it's difficult to have an exact number because, you know, people are having babies and people are arriving, people are leaving, and as with many of the informal camps in Europe, you know, there's no official numbers or official kind of registration. So yeah, the scale was the main difference to me. That I was blown away by a whole nother reason as to why people were leaving, a whole nother refugee crisis. You know, it felt overwhelming just in Europe, and then I went there, I was like, oh my god, this is global and it's mad, and this is the tip of the iceberg. You know, actually people will continue to migrate and to move, so we better get better at dealing with that now because it will only increase.
Yeah, and just to say, if anyone wants to ask questions, keep them coming. I know Sophie, my little earpiece, is writing them for me. So and also Omar, I don't know if he's still here. He's saying hi. We're interviewing him next week.
Hi,
Omar. Hi, Omar. He's still here. So on that, what would you say are the differences between, or the big difference that you noticed between that camp in Bangladesh and the European refugee camps? Because my understanding is that you're not able to have like grassroots groups support very easily there. That would be the thing that I see from the media, but you've been there. Is that true?
Yeah, so sorry, you did ask that, and that's absolutely right, that I saw a much bigger presence of the large NGOs that you kind of expect to, like, you know, when you first went to Greece, the same when I first went to France, I was expecting to see like Save the Children and UNHCR and the Red Cross and all of these names that, you know, you associate with in a refugee camp or a crisis that would be there, and in Europe that was not the case, but in Bangladesh they are there, and those presences are very much felt, and you know, there's UNHCR tarpaulin everywhere, and that there is more restrictions when it comes to who enters the camp and who leaves, which has its pros and cons. You know, it's a good thing right now because it means that actually it's taken time before Corona gets there, because it does have a lot of restrictions already implemented as to who is entering and who is leaving. So but it also, you know, restricts the population of the camp to have access to education or access to any kind of resources within Bangladesh. So the Rohingya refugees are not allowed to learn the language of Bangladesh. They can't open a bank account or buy a house or any of that, for example. They have to stay within the camp. But yeah, you're absolutely right that there are not grassroots groups working in the same way as in Europe,
Yeah.
where it was kind of all the locals and like people like us just kind of pitching in.
It's almost like a city within itself, having its own economy, because they can't integrate. They're not allowed to integrate. They can't learn the language, buy a house. So they that's their lives going forward, is this camp, unless they can move somewhere else and safely in the future.
Exactly, and that's another big difference, that it felt more long term. Like some of the people that have lived in that camp for 30 years, you know, I mean, there was a big influx in 2017, but yeah, it felt more like people were able to create some kind of permanent living situation, that albeit it being, you know, despite it still being very basic, it was not the same transient feeling of the Greek and the European camps, where you feel like people are kind of hoping to leave at any moment.
Yeah, that's that. Yeah, wow. I've got an audience member trying to be so quiet. It's very cute. Creeping around. It's very cute. And Omar's just said, hi guys, and thank you for the information. It's really interesting to hear about it. Thank you, Omar, and we are so excited to speak to you next week.
Yeah, I'll be listening.
There's a few questions that we ask every week to all our guests, and the first one is, what was your life like before Worldwide Tribe? What were you doing?
Yeah, it was a whole different life. I worked in fashion. I worked for an underwear brand called Pants to Poverty, which we produced fair trade organic cotton underwear in India. So there was a kind of charitable element there, I guess, or at least a sustainable element to the production. And I spent a lot of time in India working with organic cotton farmers and with the factory. So yeah, I was very close to the supply chain, but I had a very, I mean, I quit my job, and like everything changed for me the moment I went to Calais and that post, and like, yeah, it was quite a dramatic transformation of my life, actually, that I remember just feeling like when I first went to Calais, I couldn't think about anything else but this humanitarian crisis literally
Yeah.
unfolding on our doorstep. You know, it was like completely consuming. So yeah,
Yeah.
I haven't looked back, actually.
Yeah. I was going to say that's the best word for it, is it does consume you, doesn't it? And I was going to ask you earlier, and I forgot, it's just reminding me, where do you think the European refugee crisis would be without social media? Because of course your post went viral, and that's what got so much aid over to the camps as well. And same with Help Refugees. I mean, so much of their social media they've got such a great presence and following, and that raises so much awareness. Where do you think, or what do you think the situation would be like without social media?
It's a great question, because, you know, social media, I think, gets a lot of stick sometimes, but actually it's been the catalyst behind so much of what we've done, and really kind of the engine behind the Worldwide Tribe. It's this online community that we have on Instagram and on Facebook that is amazing and powerful, and that, you know, someone knows someone who knows someone who can do anything. And I think Choose Love and Josie are a great example of that as well, that, you know, there's so much power in that community, and social media can be used for all sorts of things, but it's a vehicle, and I guess you kind of choose how you use it.
Yeah.
And for me and for the Worldwide Tribe, it's been crucial part of our journey.
Yeah, same. I think I don't know. We would get like 10% of the volunteers we would get without it, and for us, it's so important to share what's really happening, like what the actual scene is, like, you know, sharing images and stories and everything. So that's just, yeah, I don't know where we'd be without it. Like it would there would not be the grassroots movement, I don't think, without social media.
I agree. And, you know, it was incredible at the beginning after that first Facebook post. I remember that Facebook at the time really allowed people to organize their own groups, and it would be like a collection in this city in the UK and a collection in this city, and like people would kind of self-organize under this umbrella, and social media really enabled that. And for sure, you know, it's incredible. I mean, I did a TED talk about social media and how it was called Saving Lives Through Social Media, because that's how much I believe in like its power.
that you did a TED talk. That's so cool. I didn't know that. I didn't watch that one. You have to send it to me. And also, what surprised you most about the grassroots or humanitarian sector? Like something that you didn't anticipate or know beforehand. It could be really small, it could be big. Like what did you learn, or that you wish you knew at the time?
It's power. How, you know, it was due to the grassroots groups in Europe that it was left to these groups to fill in the gaps of the large NGOs and the governments and the people that you think would have some responsibility or take some responsibility. Actually, it was completely left to the grassroots groups to fill the gaps and the holes, and that we did to the best of our ability, you know, and it was incredible to see. I'm very grateful to have been even the tiniest part of it, because it really showed me how incredible people are.
Yeah, power to the people.
Exactly.
I've got a really good question. Is your goal to change political views or influence the views of the general population?
So my belief is that if you create a ripple down, that I like to work bottom up, and you know, it's this grassroots approach as well, I think. So I believe that if you do create that ripple and you do have any kind of influence over the views of the general population, then that will filter up to ultimately change policy. And you know, of course, that's the ultimate aim, is for laws to be more, and even just, you know, the way that we for example, the hostile environment in the UK, the way that we are politically towards refugees and immigration is quite shocking to me, and pretty wrong, but in many ways. So yeah, ultimately it would be political, but I would say that I don't work on a political level. I work on a very human grassroots level, in the hope that that kind of trickles up to the powers that be.
That absolutely does. You're changing narratives, and then that's what then people can vote for, with their understanding that you're helping them have, you know.
Exactly.
I've got two more questions for you. What would you say to anyone that wants to get involved as a volunteer or as a career in this sector?
I would say go and volunteer with Indigo Volunteers. That's my go-to answer.
That's a fabulous answer. Yeah.
And Holly didn't even tell me to say that, but
I didn't.
Really would. I would say go do it. Absolutely do it. It was life-changing for me to just follow that little curiosity that I had. So if you have even the inkling of interest, then follow it up, even if that doesn't mean straight away going to volunteer in Calais or in Lesbos or in Samos, or maybe it means listening to a podcast or reading a post or watching a film and learning a little bit more, and then a little bit more, and then just see where that curiosity takes you. So yeah, I would say that you never know when you take those steps, like what path that will lead to, and that's a really beautiful thing. So I'd say do it, go for it.
Go for it. So it's so true. That was summed up really well. And what does a typical day look like for you?
It's a good question too, Holly. And at the moment, it's staying at home and eating biscuits. But I mean, no international travel at the moment, which I think has been a good thing, and it's going to really make me rethink and relook at what that looks like in the future, because previously there was a lot of of travel involved in what I was doing. So at the moment it looks to, well, actually there's a few things going on. So I've been still able, thankfully, to do all of the work that I do online, which includes the podcast and lots of putting information out there on social media and sharing messages. But I've also been working on a new project called People of the Pandemic, which is also an Instagram account. It's just at People of the Pandemic. And we have been documenting stories of everyday heroes, amplifying the voices of the people around us that are still working during this time and keeping society going and keeping things running. And that's been a really nice thing to get our teeth into, just with the people that I live with, my housemates. I've got creative housemates. So yeah, we've been working on that. But yeah, there is absolutely no typical day. And I'm sure that you agree with this as a kind of founder of a grassroots organization, that yeah, every day looks different.
When people ask me what do, I kind of get a dry throat and panic, and then I think, do I do anything? And then I get really confused.
I know. What does my team say like that? Yeah. No, I know.
The People of the Pandemic also, just FYI, is up for an award, I hear. So fingers crossed for you for that. Someone is asking, is there any age cut-off? I'm an English teacher. No, absolutely no age cut-off. Please, everyone welcome, get involved. I don't want this to end. Can I just do one bonus question with you? Because I just want to...
I've got nowhere to be.
Is there like a particular, when you look back over the last 5 years, is there a particular story that springs to mind that you feel that you want to just share with people, that's just something that it can be personal or professional, anything, just like do you have a story in mind that you're comfortable sharing?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the person that I always think about and always go to when asked this question is my little brother, Mez, who is an Eritrean refugee. And he left Eritrea when he just had his 13th birthday. He arrived in the UK when he was 14. It took him a year. And in that year, he crossed, I know I said this before, but maybe there's some new people, but he left because he was fleeing compulsory military service, and he crossed the Sahara Desert. He, didn't eat for 15 days crossing the desert. He crossed the Mediterranean Sea. His boat capsized. I mean, it's literally a ridiculous journey. He walks across Europe. He lived in the Calais jungle, and then he hid underneath the Eurotunnel train to make it to the UK. And his story for me is just, anytime that I ever come across anything that I'm like, well, this is hard today, or I just think about him, and that he did that when he was 13. I was like, I can do anything, so yeah, he's my inspiration in like the every day-to-day life. It's that story, I think, and he elaborates on it much more in that podcast episode, but it's unreal.
Yeah, wow. It's similar. Like I feel the same when I'm having a tough day. I think about things that I've seen here, and recently watched the Chernobyl documentary, and literally was having a tough moment. I think it was even last night, and I thought, it's not Chernobyl, so it's okay.
I still haven't. My housemates watched it without me, so I'm gonna have to watch it alone. But yeah, like back a few months ago. But would you recommend it?
100%. It's absolutely fabulous. Yeah, really. I learned so much. I really didn't know hardly anything about it beforehand. So yeah, completely recommend it. And someone's also asked, how do you remain so positive? I can't help but feel low, as you've mentioned, there's toxicity in the UK. And then I think also the same person has said, kind of, that's answered the question, but do you have any other sources that you go to remain positive, or things that you think about, or behaviors you do?
Yeah, I think again, it's that I do really feel, and maybe you feel this too, that through this work, it's been an incredible perspective. It gives you incredible perspective, and I'm not always positive. I definitely have my low moments as well, and I really do struggle too with that. If I am faced with people that are maybe anti-immigration or have very different views from I do, especially when I think about the people that I've actually met, and then people have kind of negative views about them, that does cut deep often, and I do find that difficult. So yeah, I'm not always positive, but we do our best, right, Holly?
Exactly. Hashtag trying.
Yeah.
I could speak to you for hours. This has been so wonderful. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. Really
You are
appreciate
so
it.
welcome.
Yeah, see you on the flip side.
On the
Thank you so
podcast.
much. On the podcast. Oh yeah, the call to action. So listen to the podcast. We'll put a link in our Insta stories. And also to the people of the pandemic. That would be really great for people to see. I've seen some of those photographs and they are just fabulous. And yeah, so we'll put those links in the Indigo stories for anyone that wants to listen and see those.
Thank you. And if you're a medical professional, that's what you're looking for with volunteers, right?
Exactly. We're doing each other's jobs. Thanks. Yeah. I've got a memo here that I'm just like keep forgetting. Yeah, and join us same time next week. We've got Omar, who runs Refugee for Refugees. He's a refugee himself from Syria, and now running this incredible organisation distributing aid across the islands. So yeah, hope to see you guys there as well. Thank you so much, Jaz.
You are so welcome. I'll speak to you soon.
See you soon. Bye.
Bye.